Hi, Misha here, and finally we're doing the update on the Yugoslavian Zastava M56 semi-auto pistol. It's kind of been an ongoing thing, used a couple of different builders, and first we tried a striker system, then hammer, and then had to redo the hammer a bit. Yeah, that's kind of when you're doing semi-autos, and of course having to obey the ATF. What ended up being the real problem is just how long of a receiver this is, plus some weird issues with using the original Yugo barrels that had some wear and tear on them that you just expect from military guns. But we're now running pretty good, keeping a lot of the original features, using the whole front section here from the kit's all original. Still has the latch for the reciprocating handle, even has the place where you can rotate it here to lock it. Kind of neat. The old school selector is here, but it doesn't do anything. And front side hood, bayonet lug. We have the original stock, which is spot welded closed, meaning it's an easy SBR if you want to do that. Rear swivel, adjustable, well, two position flip sight, and it feeds from original mags. So with that, let's get into a little more detail and some shooting footage, and then we'll come back to the table and talk about the mechanics. Alrighty, so we're going to look at three different variants here, go to the range with each, talk about how they performed, and really get into kind of troubleshooting a custom build like this, and talk about the things you try, and just kind of show you the level of patience it's often required. Although, as I've said, the M56 was particularly aggravative at the time. So here we have the original striker fire gun from Gun Builds. Then we have an earlier hammer fired from Mac Arms. And then finally we have the one you've already seen at the beginning of this video. This is a later, more standard production hammer fired from Mac Arms with a few internal but important differences. Now it's worth saying you'll notice some chipping on this lower. That's just the condition of the surplus kits. These are for the Apex kits. This one here is built from a much earlier kit, so it's cleaner. But even it has a few chips and things like right there. Like most Yugo guns, they were just used a lot in service, so what can you do? But that's kind of the point of doing a military rebuild, is to have that look. So, with that, let's start with this guy. Whenever you do these open to closed bolt conversions, you kind of have to decide striker or hammer fired. Hammer is more reliable, but usually requires more changes. If you go striker, you can usually use the same basic trigger and sear from the military gun, but instead of releasing the entire bolt to go forward, it just releases, well, the striker. So the mechanism is the same. Now this is the Gun Builds. This was one of his. He made it a little differently than I would have. He used the original caulking handle, but he took away the front. A little packing peanut in there. Oh well. Packing peanuts, they do get everywhere. He didn't have the front latch, which from a mechanical standpoint I understand. He also put a little screw, which is, you know, you can unscrew here on the striker, which is kind of a neat little thing. It gives you recockability and just better control if you wanted to ease it forward. He didn't put the stock on because he built it as a pistol, but he built this on a wholly new tube, and by the serrations, it looked like he used a tube meant for a MP38, MP40, which, you know, is fine. But, so that's why it looks a little different. But yeah, this is the striker here, so when you pull the trigger, it goes forward. And then you just cock your bolt back, that charges the striker, and go again. And he did make the selector a safety, which is one thing you can do when you do this as a striker gun. So there are some benefits, mostly just authenticity. And in the beginning, we had pretty good luck out of this. Here is a clip of the first rounds fired. M56, first shots.
Top eject, huh?
M56. M56. When we're test firing, especially with the first time, we usually do magazines of 5 to 10 rounds. Never a full load for all kinds of different reasons, especially with guns like this, because you never know sometimes when a gun, and SKS is a great example, might have a runaway firing through a hammer, follow, slam firing, stuck firing pin, all kinds of things. So if you have 5-10 rounds, you can control it. If you load these mags up all the way to 32, you're going to be controlling it a lot longer. So he didn't have any of those problems, and quite frankly, they're rare. The first 3 mags went well. In fact, it was a lot of fun, very light recoiling. The only thing is to make sure your finger is out of the way of that striker screw. But then we started to have some issues. M56. Yeah, little one that time. M56. Click. Maybe it doesn't like being grabbed there. M56.
Clicky. Very weak ejection on that one again.
Yeah, that was also that first round.
Yep.
And as Jay pointed out, yeah, the ejection was getting weaker and weaker, still using the same ammo. Now that's one thing I will mention and talk about more in this video. Ammo choice has a lot to do with guns like this, especially in 7.62 25 Tokarev. But any gun, really. We did a few things. I did take it apart. I'd look at a few things. But the situation only became worse. Much worse. M56. Weird. M56.
Nope.
Something's up, yeah. So yeah, towards the end it wasn't even working. We had several theories, but it could have been a lot of things. At the same time, like I said, this was a one-off build from Gun Builds. This was out of his collection, and he might have been using hot surplus ammo. I don't know. The fact that he put a second strike ability means he might have been having some troubles too. But anyway, Mac Arms had sent some of the Apex kits to him to be built, and initially he was doing the exact same striker setup as here, but he called and said he just couldn't get it to run reliably. He was having much the same issue. The first mag or two would work great, but very quickly it would start having failures to ignite, and just general failures for whatever reason. And I think this long tube has a lot to do with it, plus the overly hard primers that a lot of Tokarev ammo has. And when you have such a big long bolt, that means you have a long, quite narrow firing pin, which just opens it up for being bent, battered, whatever. So before even sending me his striker gun, MK, or Mac Arms, I should say, Mac Arms, reworked it into a hammer fired. So let's move on to that, because we've pretty much determined with 2 separate makes that striker is just not the way to go with the M56. Mac Arms was always the plan for manufacturing a few of these. Anywho, so one thing I like is he understands my preference for keeping it as original as possible, hence why I tried to make him striker initially. On his, though, because we had to go to hammer fired, we had to get rid of the selector as a safety. It just didn't interface well with the AR-15 trigger group setup, but it's still here as a just a dummy selector, and if someone else can figure out how to make it into a safety, it's there. Most importantly, he left the stock on, which is, I mean, why would you not? Just putting a weld on it back here. which can easily be cut if you want to SPR it, but it's plenty secure per the ATF. He also used the original bolt handle that latches into the front of the receiver here, which is nice. It also will rotate down here to serve as the holdback. And while this rear part of the tube is a new manufacture from Mac Arms, this whole front section here, from ejection port onward, is original. And that's awesome because it really takes a lot of the feed issues out. A lot of times when you're having to weld mag wells on, trunnions in, if the feed geometry is not 100% perfect, you can have issues. But when it's all a piece, you just don't. And that's one thing I'll say throughout this whole process of trying to get these to work. Feeding has rarely been an issue, and when it has, it might have been something you would have seen even on the military submachine gun. So yeah, it's mostly just the ignition of the primer. So you still have the original barrel, 10 inches. It does have the bayonet lug, front sight protector. Still has its original markings. So these are pretty authentic. In fact, profile-wise, they look like a M56 with the stock folded. You just can't unfold it. So yeah, with the prototype. Now, the original prototype is not here. This is an earlier production one. And even the original prototype I sent back and got it updated with the newest changes. So there's no problem there. But let's see how the first of the prototype hammer fires did at the range. M56 hammer fired. Click. See what we got going on. Looks, it's an odd little. So yeah, not auspicious. Let's do it again. Let's give it another try. M56. Okay. Much better that time. Clear. Alright, so second attempt. Much better. I'm sitting here thinking when we're at the range, okay, maybe the first one was just a fluke. That ran well. Let's throw another mag in it. M56. Click. May not have picked one up. I gave it a... And then back to that. Now that was a different mag, and I thought it might have been a feeding issue. I don't think so though. The round actually did go in, out. That didn't seem to be the problem. Well, again, if you're doing these, repetitions are all you've got to do. So let's keep going.
Click, no bang.
Yep. M56. That's what I thought. I think the firing pin broke. There had been one or two other click no bangs there too. That's why I was thinking maybe that long firing pin was having troubles.
Nope. Live round.
Yep. Keep going. Good?
Good. Good.
Click.
Good.
Our luck, that's the empty mag.
This is the dimpled but not fired live round.
Or not. The gun was, I don't know, just starting to mess with us at this point. So, perseverance, dear friends, perseverance. M56 with alternative PPU ammo. Click. So we've done here. It's feeding great. It's just not igniting. Any dimple in this one?
Yep.
So it's got a dimple.
Yep. Very slight, but there.
So that, I think, I need a better spring, but let's keep trying.
You're good?
Click. So yeah, we tried at least a few different mags, even though, as I said, the feeding wasn't the problem. Never hurts to try that. If you can change a variable, you do it, just to roll that out. Unfortunately, the only types of Tokarev we had were Red Army Standard, which I'm not even sure if we recorded it because it didn't work well, but to be fair, that is light ammo meant for pistols. It doesn't work in most 7.62 carbines. And then we had two different types of PPU. Now I will say, Mac Arms tested theirs with Cellar and Bellot. Unfortunately, we didn't have any and couldn't get any at the time. They were sold out. That seems to be better ammo for this, a little warmer. Didn't have any surplus we really wanted to mess with. So, there you have it. Feeding was good, but the primers are getting dimpled, but it seems to be just light strikes, which means it needs either a redesigned firing pin or, more likely, a stronger hammer spring. Now keep in mind, on these hammer guns, you're transmitting a hammer from way back here, the force, to a bolt that comes all the way up here. That's a long way to go. And then the energy has to go all the way through the bolt, through the firing pin, and hit that chamber. So, yeah, you need strong force to do it, but at the same time, if you make a firing pin too heavy, too long, too punchy, you run the risk of either having slam fires, if it's too heavy, or primer penetration, which is no bueno. It is a balancing act. The one good thing, again, nice feeding, which means the mainspring for the bolt seems to be doing its job just fine. It's cycling, it's bouncing back and forth in the tube as it should. So at this point, we had other guns. Sent to the accumulated clips and observations, checked it out, and then let Mac Arms check it back out. Again, that was a prototype, so, these things are to be expected, and he had tried it with different ammo, different mags. So for that, we shelved it for a bit, let him tinker with it, and so we were going to pick up with the revised hammer design. For our third outing, we brought two from Mac Arms, both hammer fired. Figured better to have two. Well, let's see how the revised hammer edition did. M56 hammer fired. Quickie. Not again. Keep on. Let's try changing some variables like the magazine and such. M56. There is another mag on the chair. M56. Okay, well that was better.
Yeah, like the ejection pattern on that.
I really enjoyed it going in my mouth. Right in the face. For once, changing the magazine worked, which for this one doesn't surprise me because it had a bit of a tight mag well. So, got at least a string out of it. What about the other one we brought out? Well, the major difference between these two is the bolt. This one has a slightly longer, slightly heavier bolt and a slightly different firing pin. How did she do? The second M56. And that's how you do it. It was so nice to finally have a full mag go through it. So, the second one performed quite a bit better right out of the gate. And so we seem to have a winner design here. I mean, still some tweaking might be needed, but we have good striking, and we have good feeding, and all of that. So the longer bolt seems to have helped. With that, let's go to the table and check out how this thing ticks. Take it apart, look at the internals and what was modified to make it semi-auto. So, what we ended up doing, disassembly and all that. Best thing to do is make sure it is charged. And then, like the original, you press in here to rotate this here cap. Get over here where I can do it a little better. Then you press in on your here cap. That separates your lower. Let's look at this for a minute, and then we'll get to the upper. Notice how it does hold itself closed, which is nice. Here's our semi-auto trigger group. It is based on AR-15, just modified, which is nice. So if it ever breaks, at least parts will be available. Otherwise, the lower is pretty well standard. As for the tube, this tab holds it in. You just, this one's a little stiff. This is our kind of back plate here, and this is our main bolt spring. The reason it's not the big spring is we have to have clearance for the hammer to work. To get the rest of your bolt out, you move it to the disassembly notch here, and then the way the bolt is made, you rotate it till it comes out. It's kind of keyed, so that's all original. Here's our bolt, spring-loaded firing pin. It's all original there. This was modified for firing from the closed bolt. Of course, it's notched for our new recoil spring. And that was kind of the big deal, was to get the right spring weight and also the length of the bolt, because this is heavy, so you want it heavy enough to work, but too heavy or too light, you run into problems. So you kind of have to cut your original bolt, because the original was really long and the tube's long, and so, you know, it's just kind of trial and error. And of course, on top of that, it's a matter of which ammo you want to shoot. Here's our empty tube. Do you want to shoot surplus that's maybe a little hot? Or do you want to shoot PPU or Red Army Standard that is probably very mild? And these machine guns were originally made for, of course, the warmer stuff. But sometimes military surplus ammo isn't always the most available. But, you know, for people who like problem solving and that mechanical stuff, doing things like this is a lot of fun. So it just goes in. But if that's not really your bag, your cup of tea, then don't do it. Because these things can be very rewarding, but also they can be very frustrating. And this here, you just kind of line it up. Put this back in. Again, that's just kind of our end piece. This is all original here. We want to line the slot up. And then you can lock it closed, just like on the original. And the trick on the front here is it's a little bit of a tight fit.
Quick question before you do that.
Okay.
There's wood inside the lower receiver.
Yeah, that was done on the military guns. I think Forgotten Weapons explains exactly why, but it's kind of a stability thing. Why not, you know?
Like an internal reinforcement.
Yeah, that kind of thing. They had it. Why not? Give it a little strength. You know, like the CZ stuff, they use that wood synthetic mix. But no, that's, as far as I know, correct and original.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. So once you get this kind of squeeze back on, you just loosen this up in theory and screw it back. Press your button. And it's back together as much as these ever were. Again, mentioning Forgotten Weapons, he talks about how these sometimes like to self-disassemble when machine gun mode. At least one benefit of being a semi-auto, less vibration, less friction, less likely to happen. But yeah, it comes apart and goes back together just like an original, be that a good or a bad thing. We'll move on. M56. Okay. So this one is running good, and we are running out of 7.6225 Tokarev, but we have a little bit more. So let's keep on. M56. Alrighty. Okay. So there we have it. I have now christened this one with a sling, which some might know what that means. Seems to be a good, acceptable model. The only thing I'll probably do when I find the new set of handguards, I'll probably swap them. This one's got a few chips in it, especially on the other side. But it's just honest wear from where it was at. But I will not SBR it. I don't typically SBR kit guns like this, especially when you can still have the original stocks on them. It is perfectly controllable, being shot as a quote-unquote pistol. And because these are, I don't want to call them range toys. I don't think any gun's a toy, for one thing. But this isn't something you're going to be defending your home with. This is a Cold War piece. I don't really want to call it a replica. I like to call these rebuilds, because so much of the gun is original Zastava. The whole lower, magazines, the bolt, the barrel, even the whole front part of the receiver. Of course, things are modified. The trigger, the bolt, but it's as original as the ATF will let you get. Another reason, though, I don't really want to SBR it, these are never going to be 100% reliable, ever. One thing, the original gun wasn't 100%, and for another, doing a home brew conversion like this isn't going to get you there. So we did have a few malfunctions still. We had one interesting one, though, I'll show you, because I think the gun thought it was a big boy. I thought it might have thought it was an MP5. Take a look. M56. I got you. No. Yeah. Oh, that's cool. I see what happened there. That's obvious.
What happened?
Check it.
Oh, yeah, that would do it.
Yeah, that would do it.
Spent casing inside the chamber.
I think that,
right
no,
above the chamber.
this one up here. There's two.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm saying, is it's like live round in the chamber and then a spent casing on top of it.
Gonna need something to get that out with.
Huh. Well,
maybe a screw. I think a screwdriver could pop it out. Alright. That only happened once out of the whole 3-4 range trips we've done so far with any of these. It was just a fluke. And the reason I mentioned MP5, they're known for having a not dissimilar double feed where an empty shell will get stuck above the bolt group inside the receiver. It just happens. And there's something interesting that Mac Arms noticed after we showed him that video. The barrels are original, which is generally good. They're hammer forged. But they were also used in combat. And once he got to looking at the kits from Apex, a couple, maybe 3, had shell casing necks in them. Like where a shell had broken during the military service and they'd pulled out the rear but left the front in. Once he found that on one, he checked others and found it too, which makes us wonder how many of our problems were due to old casings. And they're a part of an old case in the chamber. Another thing, we found some of these have worn chambers. And the thing there is there's not much you can do because when the bullet fits in there, it's a little bit loose and wiggly. Meaning sometimes if it's just kind of canted down up or whatever, your firing pin's going to strike the primer a little off center. And you're going to end up with something like this. M56. Well, that was spectacular. Clicky. M56. or that. With those, you had a click, no bang. The hammer went forward, the firing pin went forward. It even dimpled the primer, but it was enough off-center that it did not detonate. And there's not a great fix for that because, well, it's more to do with the chamber. Maybe the ammo too. Again, we only had PPU. I'm excited to try some other types. I might even try some surplus in it now that I've kind of picked one. But you're just going to run into little things like that. And I have sold a couple of these on Gunbroker, and I've tried to tell people. So it's all about expectations. If you're wanting a 100% modern style gun that's going to run 100% with all ammo and all mags, anything like this is not for you. The IO/PAC PPS 43C comes to mind, which is a mass-produced gun. It just doesn't run with all ammo types. However, if you want something cool and unique to hang on the wall, to show friends, to be historical relic, to be the only one that really has one on the block, and that if that is what you're looking for, just for fun, that's why I myself have so many of these. Hello, hobo. Hello. Hey, it's a cat. Yeah, so that's the reason I have quite a few semi-auto conversions. They're far less money, of course, than a full auto. I don't SBR most of them, just for fun. And they're interesting. And the parts kits won't be around forever. And frankly, it just makes me sad seeing a cut-up gun. So, here it is. Look at it this way. Even if you only get one shot off at a time, that's still more than you would get when it was in parts kit form. So, this video has been a long time in the making, so I hope you enjoyed it. We did promise an update to the M56 project, and I think now we've got a pretty workable design. We know about the right bolt length. Maybe try to tweak the firing pin a bit to compensate for any that might have overly worn chambers, but other than that, we're good to go. Unfortunately, Apex is out of kits now, but maybe more will come in. And if you haven't seen our original videos, you can check those out. We do disassemble the striker gun on the first one too. If you have any questions or comments, please post them below. And as always, if you could, like, share, and subscribe. And if you'd like to help support the channel, please check out the link to our Patreon page. This is Misha, and we will catch you very soon next time.